I paused, eyes flicking to the side of the road as the haunted, decrepit form drifted past. Nothing more than a crumbling shack with faded, dead paint, a warped, crooked sign perched atop the front door, reading, "Timeless, a thrift store." The deserted shop sat all alone at the end of a worn-down dirt road, surrounded by nothing but a dirt meadow with a few patches of grass. It almost appeared like a mirage, my words hesitating in my throat as I dropped my phone slightly from my face. "Yeah, wait, no, I still got an hour drive," I mumbled into the device. "No, I-7 was closed." "Yeah, I know." Whether consciously or subconsciously, I felt my foot lifting off the gas, my eyes flashing to my rearview mirror to check if there were any cars behind me, as the pavement slowed beneath me. "Yeah, hey, listen." I paused. "Have you seen this, timeless place before?" The voice crackled in my ear like stones, my engine idling as my eyes were now glued in the rearview mirror, staring at the shop. "No, it's like a thrift store, I guess?" I mumbled, turning my head around to look at it, as if still unsure it was really there. "You never driven down this road? It's in the middle of fucking nowhere." I frowned, glancing out at the horizon all around me. Not a car was in sight. "Not a hoarder," I rolled my eyes. "And I'm not hallucinating. I don't know how you could have missed it, but dude, this thing has definitely been here forever. It looks like it's about to frickin' crumble to dust. Yeah, I'm about an hour out." I grudgingly again listened to the voice grate in my skull, checking behind me one more time before shifting my car into reverse. "I'm already delayed an hour because of that closure." I leaned over my seat as I began backing up to the dirt road. Come on, it's like, at this point, I would kill myself if I didn't check this place out, and it doesn't matter. They might have freaking heads in jars or something, I don't know, this place is freaky, I'm telling you. "No, come on, I've got all the time in the world." My car began rattling a harsh, skeletal jangle as it lurched onto the unpaved road, dust clouds billowing out from behind as rocks clanked beneath my feet. Hello? Listen, reception is shit here." I shook my head. I'm fine, What? "Mark, yeah, okay, I gotcha, okay. In and out, gotcha." "What?" "Alright, Jesus Christ, I'll see you soon. Later." I sighed, lowering the phone and tossing it into the passenger seat beside me, as my other hand gripped for dear life on my steering wheel. Another lurch in the road nearly left my head to crack against the steering column, my foot slamming down the brake as I tensed up and rapidly slowed my car down. Jesus, this road was worse than it looked. I began accelerating again at a much slower pace, having time now to really examine the shack as it slowly loomed closer. The windows were caked with a brown rust of sorts, dingy, clotted, and discolored. There was no telling what was inside. An open sign hung lopsidedly from a large railroad spike stabbed beside the door, the metal chipped away and eroded to gangly spines. I again glanced around the property as my car rolled to a slow stop. Endless plains stretched into oblivion, a gust of dry, hot air whipping through my hand as I stepped out of the car and tried to shield myself. Sand and grit clawed at my lungs, the dust from my driving curling back in my direction like a vengeful storm. I winced through the haze, watching how the metal roofing of the shack distorted with intense heat, several tumbleweeds snagged on the gnarled structure. I walked forward slowly, Pretty certain by this point I would simply be walking into someone's house that they had just hung a sign up on. This was probably just a glorified garage sale or moving sale, more likely. Someone trying to get rid of their belongings before they actually moved to civilization. This was still fine with me, being the living embodiment of one's man's trash is another man's treasure. Garage sales were a huge passion of mine. They always contain items with cool stories and unique trinkets one could hardly find in a modern store. My shoes crunched on the hard, red clay beneath me, the dust storm finally subsiding, and giving me second thoughts as I saw the building up close clearly for the first time. There was no way anyone lived here. Maybe they did at one point, but had since vacated? Maybe that moving sale had already come and gone. It certainly looked like it from the absolute desolation that lay before me. The windows cracked at the corners, letting foul air seep out from the dark structure. I continued walking, however, my eyes glancing once again at the sign above the shop. Timeless, I thought to myself, wooden boards creaking beneath me as I stepped onto the patio. Hardly. I again hesitated for a brief second before trying at the rusty spike-infested handle of the door. From inside the dark space, a little bell gave a soft, distant ding. A wave of must and rot spilled out from inside, several dim light bulbs greeting me as the door swung open without so much as a squeak.
Hello?
I called inside, opening the heavy door as far as I could and simply standing in the doorway for several seconds, curiosity striking me as the interior of the shop yawned back. The space was actually quite large, but was crammed so full of lopsided shelves and splintered wood that I couldn't imagine anything more uncomfortably cramped. Hundreds of small trinkets littered every surface, while what looked like several large clocks hung from the ceiling. Their massive, silent forms stayed eerily stagnant for all the howling wind ripping in from the outside, silhouetted and dim, like hung corpses rotting away in the darkness. My eyes scanned the entire space with ravenous interest, seeing absolutely no counter space anywhere. No cash register, nothing at all to suggest this was actually a store at all.
Hello?
I again repeated, seeing no one in the single-room space, the murky green carpet diluted by my shadow, as I stepped further inside and allowed my eyes to wander to the closest shelf. My eyes narrowed, my feet carrying me closer to the objects. What, at first, looked like a myriad of trinkets turned out to be slight variations on the same item. This shop was full of clocks. Only clocks. The faces were all encased in different styles of woodwork and plastic, some being goofy ducks and cartoon characters, others beautifully crafted metalwork. I leaned yet closer, stealing a glance behind me before reaching out and picking up one that resembled a miniature grandfather clock. I turned it around in my hands, feeling its weight and marveling at the craftsmanship of the intricate details, before looking at the actual clock face and quickly comparing it to several others. They were all the same. Each was encased in something unique, but the actual face of the clock was shared among every iteration. Must have all been made by the same person or company. I walked down the aisle further, setting down the grandfather clock and sweeping my eyes over countless others. They weren't just the same face. All the clocks were in exact, eerily precise sync. The second hands looked like a wave of motion, each one lurching forwards at precisely the same time as the next. And yet, everything was dead silent. None of the clocks made a sound, even their combined motion not allowing their machinery to be heard. I again picked up a smaller clock and held it to my ear. Nothing. Setting the device back down, I began to realize just how suffocating the silence really was. All this motion, these waves and waves of ticking hands accompanied by such unsuitable silence. It actually made me a little nauseous, as if I was getting seasick. I tried to shake the feeling, reaching into my pocket to take a picture, before my hand came up with nothing. I had left my phone in my car. Shit, I hissed to myself, turning around and checking the time on my own wristwatch before heading back towards the door, and then hearing rustling. The sign peeked out from behind several clocks, moving slightly as I brushed past. I immediately paused and turned back to it, brushing aside the soundless devices to squint at the dark, faded lettering. "Take one, leave one," it read in small, serif-heavy text. "Fair exchange required." I smirked, finally understanding why this shop was so strange. It wasn't really a shop at all, it was more like a little free library. Probably forgotten about years ago, if anyone had ever come. I smiled again at the quaintness of it all, quickly re-grabbing the grandfather clock and slowly undoing my wristwatch to take its place. Before I could finish, however, I heard it. Faint and distant. Something was ticking. I paused slowly, ears engulfing the endless silence to try and pinpoint the source of the sound. I slowly turned in a circle, the sound not changing in volume or direction no matter which way I faced. Frowning, I suddenly looked back to my own wristwatch and hurriedly brought it up to my ear. Silence. I pulled back my wrist to stare in curiosity, expecting my watch to have stopped. I knew for a fact it usually ticked. I had to take it off at night because it often kept me awake if I forgot. But it was still running. I brought it up again only to hear nothing but gruesome silence emitting from it. The ticking sound did continue from somewhere else, however, noticeably growing louder as I dropped the grandfather clock into my pocket and rounded one of the shelves. I scanned the space with darting eyes before I began to notice something else. The ticking was initially in sync with the movement of every clock in the room, but the longer I listened, the longer it took me to find it, the more I could tell. It was slowly, ever so slowly, getting off time. The clocks would stab forwards, but more and more the sound was beginning to lag behind. My search was beginning to become humorously yet frustratingly frantic, the sound abnormally hard to pinpoint, not a single visible clock appearing out of sync to match the sound. As I rounded another corner, I suddenly flinched back slightly, a blinding pinprick of light piercing through a grimy window at the back of the store. The glass was again yellowed and decayed, but this time semi-transparent enough to get me to stop my search for the sound in its tracks. I quickly approached the window, wiping away dirt and feeling my pupils constrict painfully as a whitewashed field greeted me. The dead grass was bleached away as if surviving massive nuclear fallout, the dusty ground so parched, cracks split like rivets across its entire surface. But that wasn't it. The field was full of cars. Their painted bodies glinted harshly in the scorching sun, the entire scene quavering from scalding heat waves lurching from every metal surface. There were mostly old muscle cars, indicating this was perhaps a junkyard, but my eyes narrowed as I spotted several newer models too, looking as if they had been towed behind the shop. That's when the heat distortion slowly flared up and I began to hallucinate. Or rather, I couldn't quite explain what I was seeing. Splotches of red flickered into view as if armies of ants had begun to overtake the cars. Then the red splotches opened up like bleeding sores, peeling back paint and metalwork as the material sharpened into uneven crimson rust before my eyes. The glossy paint of the newer cars flickered like in a blender, tarnishing and beginning to fade away. The older cars jaggedly twitched slightly out of alignment as if blurring in my vision as their bodies began to fall apart, metal stripped to rust and rust to the same red dirt they once stood atop of. I quickly peeled my eyes away from the window, cold sweat rushing through my body. As I turned around, the clocks again faced me like countless eyes, the ticking sound now maddeningly off sync. And this disparity had become so much more apparent now that the other clocks had begun to tick as well. The thunderous roar of countless clocks was rapidly growing louder. The nausea returned full force, the room swimming as if the second hands were trying to wrench my visual perception along with them, tilting everything upside down. As I struggled to maintain my balance and shakily stepped away from the window, I was beginning to notice another thing. The pitch was dropping. Every tick, even the off-sync one, were becoming more of a thudding drum with each new slam of the hands. The once cute, mechanical clicking mutated further and further downwards, beginning to shake the floor with every pulse. I felt vomit escape my lips before I even knew it had risen in my throat. It fell to the floor in a sloppy mess as I felt it squish beneath my staggering footsteps. The off-sync pang was beginning to become physically painful, for the first time seeming as if it was struggling to catch up. That's when it hit me how fast all of the other clocks were going, black, jutting hands beginning to mangle as they screeched along the dials. The one clock hadn't been getting out of sync, all the others had been speeding up. Now, like a percussive thunder, clocks were being thrown to the floor where they bounced around with every note. Cogs and sprockets scattered like glimmering severed limbs, my vision pounding with blurring shapes as the shop sounded like an approaching freight train. My legs staggered to push me towards the front door of the shop, metal and wood shavings lacerating my skin. My own wristwatch still on me was pounding like a jackhammer, my frantic clawing unable to tear open the latch before the metal device splintered as if containing C4. My body stumbled into a shelf with a hard crack as blood squelched from my wrist with a spray of boiling red. No space in between the ticks at all anymore. The air was filled with a piercing, demonic rumble as I watched my blood dirty before my eyes, oxygen draining immediately as it dried within seconds into a flaky brown rot. The shelf digging into my side was promptly lurched to the floor as the ground roared with vibrations. I staggered out of its way, clutching my wrist to my shirt and feeling sour blood pooling in my mouth. My wrists pressed against my chest, the fabric barely any barrier. from what I finally realized was the offset clock. Not a clock at all. The low, steady rumble thudded against my injured wrist, the very thing pumping blood from me. Pounding needle gears and weighted pendulums screamed in every direction as the clocks continued to tear themselves apart. My blood was beginning to sully more and more rapidly, beginning to pump out faster and faster as my heart struggled to reach the breakneck pace of the deafening room. The thundering of it in my chest soon became crippling as the falling shelves blurred into dark, incoherent shapes in my fading vision. My stumbling towards the door was shattered with sewing needle stabs of my machine gun heart, the blood within me quickly souring into unoxygenated tar. I rolled to the ground, where the bouncing metallic shrapnel of innumerable clocks tore like glass into my flesh. Blood now flaked out like dust, metal shrieking past my downed form as I rolled to face the front door. Grime gripped the front windows, and yet I was able to see the light outside, shifting through my distorted vision, clouds scraping across the sky in nauseating haste. The sun flickered like a strobe, the horizon leaping up to consume it at regular intervals. Dark, rickety scaffolding vaulted into the sky from my peripheries, tendrils of industrialization blaring in the distant desert beyond the filthy windows. My car was long gone, the ground where it once sat threadbare and scratched with the tires of another vehicle. The cracked ground continued to flicker, the tracks of dragged tires leading around the back of the shop, fading as layers of silt and dust twitched to erase the past. My choking coughs quickly filled with dry grime, sleek, polished black shoes stepping down next to my head before I even heard the footsteps. The entire room vibrated in repulsive motions around the silhouetted figure as it calmly kneeled down next to me and gracefully plucked the small grandfather clock from my pocket. Its fingers worked nimbly and with great precision as it softly placed the device back down into my view. The clock was the only one still intact, hands softly and silently working their way around the tainted dial at a normal speed. The figure delicately adjusted its suit, rising back to its feet with gentle motions.
"That's a nice one,"
the figure spoke in a smooth voice, face obscured by the rotting of my own retinas.
"One of my favorites. A fair trade, indeed."
It strode in lengthy, elongated strides to the front door, hands leisurely swinging down by its side as it unhurriedly traversed the distance.
"My time for yours."
It turned back softly, smile widening as its gnarled hand slowly began to open the door.
"I appreciate you coming in. Now I do believe I have a friend to meet, about an hour out."
Dust kicked up into the store, my crooked, knobby hands reaching out at nothing at all.
"I do hope I'm not late."
The figure's teeth flashed, chasm smile, fading into darkness.
"How I hate wasting time."